Welcome back to the Literacy Lounge. This is our final lesson in our series about teaching multilingual learners and students who speak language variations. And today we're going to be focusing on vocabulary and comprehension. So, vocabulary refers to understanding the meaning of words as they are used in context. And we can classify vocabulary into a three-tier system. So tier 1 is the most basic level of vocabulary. These are words used in everyday conversation. Tier 2 would be words that are used more in academic settings, words that you would hear more at school rather than at home. And then the most complex tier is tier 3, and these are words that are used in specific fields. So in the sentence that I have as an example, the girl was asked to summarize the paragraph on evaporation. Tier 1 words in this sentence would be girl, asked. Tier 2 words would be summarize or paragraph. And then Tier 3 would be the word evaporation, which is really specific to science. Then comprehension refers to the understanding and learning from a text. This is the goal of reading. All of the sub-skills in our reading instruction all lead up to a student being able to comprehend a text. So it requires those proficient foundational skills that we've learned about: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency. All of those are playing a role in the end goal of comprehension. However, there are some other things to consider if a student is having problems with comprehending a text. I would look at foundational skills first, but some other things to consider would be their background knowledge on a text, the vocabulary understanding that they have, and we'll talk more about those two things here today, but also their interest in the text. Think about myself as an adult. If I'm not interested in a topic, I'm really going to struggle to get through the text and learn from it. So the same applies to our students as well. As always, I like to tie the skills that we're talking about back to the reading rope to see where the role that they play in overall skilled reading. So you can see vocabulary is included there in the language comprehension strands. And comprehension really is all of those language comprehension strands playing a role, and then as well as skilled reading at the end. Like I said, that's the goal of reading, is to comprehend what has been read. Cardenas Hagen states that vocabulary knowledge is the key contributing factor to academic success for our multilingual learners. It rises above other factors that we may think come first, like socioeconomic status, native language literacy acquisition. Vocabulary knowledge rises above that. So that really speaks to the importance of intentionally planning our instruction for multilingual learners. And here are some things to consider. It's important to understand your students' oral language proficiency. What skills do they already have, and what support will they need, so you can make scaffolds with your vocabulary instruction. It's important to integrate new words with concepts that students already know. Connecting to prior knowledge is really going to cement that new learning. Students should be using words in a variety of ways over several days. These vocabulary words should stretch throughout a week or two, not just in one day or one lesson, and students should be reading, writing, and talking about the words as much as possible. It's important to capitalize on those points of transfer we've talked about. Using cognates to teach vocabulary can be very valuable. Depending on your student's native language, there may be many whole word cognates or word parts, so it's important to consider the morphological piece there as well. It's important to use visual supports or real-life objects to enhance a student's understanding. And then lastly, it's been shown that home native language acquisition and proficiency can support English language acquisition, so it's important to encourage vocabulary development in the home language. When planning comprehension instruction for our multilingual learners or students speaking language variations, it's important to connect topics to students' prior experiences to build that background knowledge. They may not have experience with the specific topic, but if you can connect it in any way to something that they have done in their life, it will really help them understand the words and the concepts that are being read about. It's important to teach the text structures of the different genres and their purposes to help with analyzing text. It's important to always model retelling and summarizing strategies using predictable routines. Depending on your student's proficiency, sentence stems could be a great scaffold for that. And then always asking open-ended questions and encouraging students to generate questions of their own in a variety of ways. Cardenas Hagen has an approach to teaching vocabulary and comprehension that's called or abbreviated as 3PV3RQ. So hopefully by the end you have that memorized. And 3PV3RQ stands for the 3Ps, which is purpose, prepare, predict, and then vocabulary. And then the 3Rs, read, review, retell, and question. So I'm going to walk you through what this approach would look like using a text to teach vocabulary and comprehension strategies. This is the text I'll be using, and this would be geared more towards primary grades, but 3PV, 3RQ could be adapted for any grade level, any proficiency level. But this is how I would start. The first P stands for purpose, so I would set the purpose of the lesson or the unit. So I would tell my students we'll be learning about where different animals live and what they need. The next P is prepare, and that means I'm preparing by connecting to students' prior knowledge. So I would encourage them to think about where we live. What is it like here? We could discuss the weather. Do we live in a city or is it more rural? And what are some things we need to survive? We need food, we need clothing, we need a home. And that would all connect to what students already know and experience in their day-to-day life. And then the last P stands for predict, and I would ask students, what do you think it's like where this polar bear lives? The next part of 3PV, 3RQ is V for vocabulary. So this is when I would make sure that students have understanding of the vocabulary words that are included in the text. This is an informational text with a science background. So I would make sure that students have knowledge of these tier 3 vocabulary words. Luckily, this text has a glossary, so that's a great way to integrate knowledge of that text feature as well. So I would show students the glossary. These are the words the author thinks that we need to understand before reading the text. Luckily, they included visuals, but if those were not there for us, I would make sure that my students could see a visual of each word. And then kind of a way to integrate a real life experience would be to make this blubber glove. So you would use vegetable shortening on a Ziploc bag and then stick your hand in the bag into a bowl of ice water. And you would feel that the vegetable shortening is acting like blubber to protect your hand from the cold. So that's a great way to enhance understanding of that word in a real life scenario. Lastly, when planning vocabulary instruction, it's really important to preview the text yourself. This text came with a preset list of words, but that's not always the case. So looking through the text and determining what words are important for your students to understand is a great way to prepare for vocabulary instruction. Also, even if there is a list given like here in my book, I previewed the text and found some tier 2 words that, based on my students' proficiency, they may not know. So some examples of those are explore, searching, and protected. So I would make sure that those are words that we at least give a definition of as we're reading the text, so my students understand some of those tier 2 words as well. Next is the 3 R's. So the first R is read the text. We could implement some of our fluency strategies, either do choral reading, echo reading, or partner reading. And then we would review some of the information or vocabulary from the text. When doing an informational text like this, we end with that glossary again, so that's a great way to circle back to that vocabulary. And then we could add, what did you learn more about blubber after reading the text? And then last R is retell. So I would encourage students to retell the text using a predictable routine, using sentence stems as a scaffold, and retelling it with a partner or using a graphic organizer. The last part of 3PV, 3RQ is question. Cardenas-Hagen describes 3 different kinds of questions to use that kind of increase in complexity. So the first kind of question is a right there question. I think of it as the answer being right there. It's easily found in the text. It's the most basic kind of recall question. So for our story, an example of that would be, what do polar bears eat? And what helps a polar bear stay warm? And then the next kind of question would be a think and search question. Cardenas-Hagen describes this as a kind of question where the answer is kind of in multiple places, and the students need to connect those ideas to formulate a response. So for our story, that would be, what does a mother polar bear do to protect her cubs? Then the last kind of question is the most complex, referred to as the author and you question. So it's taking into account what the author states about the topic and what you infer about the topic. So how would a polar bear's life be different if it lived in a different place? That would be an example of an author and you question. So to wrap up, vocabulary refers to the words that students need to know in order to understand a text. So good vocabulary instruction for our multilingual learners should build off of students' prior knowledge, connect new words to experiences or words that students already understand, and also include instruction about cognates and morphology, and use visual or real-life objects to enhance understanding. Comprehension is the goal of reading. It refers to understanding and learning things from text. And so comprehension and instruction should include models of retelling and summarizing. Remember, sentence stems and routines can be a great way to scaffold those skills. And teaching text structures and text features is a great way to help in analyzing text. Students need many opportunities to practice using vocabulary and comprehension strategies working with words over multiple days, not just with one lesson or one day. And then the strategy that I modeled is 3PV, 3RQ from Cardenas-Hagen. That's a great instructional routine for implementing vocabulary and comprehension instruction. But my model would be one day. Remember, students should be provided opportunities over multiple days, and so our overall concept would be those habitats. So I would continue to discuss habitats with more text and build on that vocabulary, encouraging students to talk about and read about those words over multiple days.